This story is titled, My Fiancé Refuses to Set a Wedding Date and Keeps Saying We Should Just Enjoy Being Engaged. I always thought love was supposed to move forward, that when two people found each other, built a life together, and made promises, there was a natural next step, a future waiting to unfold. I'm Claire, 34, a school teacher. I've never been the kind of woman to rush things, but I've also never been one to sit still and wait for life to happen to me. When I met Daniel, everything felt right. He was charming, thoughtful, the kind of man who made you feel safe just by standing next to him. We dated for 4 years before he proposed. 4 happy, steady, beautiful years. I never doubted for a second that he was my person. When he got down on one knee in the park where we had our first date, with the autumn leaves swirling around us like something out of a movie, I said yes before he even finished asking. For a while, I floated on that cloud of newly engaged bliss. The excitement, the endless Pinterest scrolling, the way my mother cried when I showed her the ring. It all felt like the beginning of something wonderful. But then, nothing. Weeks turned into months, and whenever I brought up setting a date, Daniel had the same answer. Let's not rush, Claire. Let's just enjoy being engaged. At first, I understood. Wedding planning was overwhelming. We both had busy jobs. Maybe he just needed time. But then months turned into a year, and every time I mentioned venues or guest lists or even something as simple as choosing a season, he found a way to avoid the conversation. Why do we need a date right now? Let's just focus on us. Weddings are stressful. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I started feeling like I was the only one moving forward, while he was content keeping us in this endless state of almost married, but not quite. One night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, I turned to him, trying to keep my voice light. Dan, do you think we should at least set a year for the wedding? Just so we have a time frame? He didn't even look away from the screen. Claire, why are you so obsessed with this? His tone was sharp, annoyed, like I had asked something completely unreasonable. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. I just thought it'd be nice to have something to look forward to. He sighed, rubbing his temple. We already have something to look forward to. We're engaged. Isn't that enough? I didn't know how to answer that. Because no, it wasn't enough. Not anymore. A few days later, my best friend Amy invited me out for drinks. She was recently married, still glowing from the honeymoon, and I envied the certainty in her eyes when she spoke about her husband. As we sipped our wine, I finally admitted, Dan doesn't want to set a date. Amy frowned. Still? I nodded, playing with the stem of my glass. Claire, she said gently, has he ever actually said he wants to get married? I opened my mouth to answer, but the words caught in my throat. Of course he wanted to. He proposed, didn't he? But now that she had asked, I realized something. Dan had never been the one to bring up marriage, not once in 4 years. It had always been me. Amy watched my face closely. Claire, I love you, but maybe he's just comfortable keeping things the way they are. And if that's the case, you need to ask yourself, are you okay with that? That question haunted me. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling while Dan slept soundly beside me. I wanted to believe he loved me enough to follow through on his promise, that he was just scared, or unsure, or needed time. But how much time was I willing to give? The next morning, I decided to have an honest conversation. No more tiptoeing. No more pretending I was fine with things staying the same. I found him in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone while sipping coffee. He looked up with a sleepy smile. Morning, he said. I took a deep breath. Dan, we need to talk. His smile faltered. That sounds serious, it is. I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. I need to know if you actually want to get married. He frowned. Claire, come on. Of course I do. Then why won't you set a date? He exhaled, rubbing his jaw. Because I don't see why it has to be such a big deal. We're together, we're happy. Why do we need some huge wedding to prove it? I studied him carefully. This isn't about the wedding, Dan. It's about commitment. His jaw tensed. I am committed. Then why does taking the next step scare you so much? His fingers tightened around his coffee mug. Because it changes everything, he muttered. For a moment, the world went silent. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me then, really looked at me. And for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that I had never noticed before. Doubt. Not about me, but about us. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to hear his answer. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. Dan, what do you mean it changes everything? He sighed, running a hand through his hair, his gaze drifting away from mine. Marriage is just different, Claire. It's final. It's forever. His words cut through me like a blade. And that scares you? His silence was louder than any answer he could have given. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. Then why did you propose? He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Because I love you. I wanted to make you happy. He hesitated before adding, I thought I'd get there. I thought I'd wake up one day and be ready. My stomach twisted. Get there? I repeated. So you're saying you're not ready? His eyes met mine then, filled with something between guilt and regret. I don't think I ever will be. The air left my lungs. The walls of our apartment, our life together, felt like they were closing in. Dan. My voice cracked, but I forced myself to go on. You knew from the beginning that marriage was important to me, that it wasn't just some fairy tale fantasy. It was something I needed. And you still got down on one knee and promised it to me, knowing all along that you might never follow through. He looked away. I thought I could give you what you wanted. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped against the floor. You didn't propose because you wanted to marry me. You did it to keep me. He didn't deny it. I felt like I was standing in the wreckage of something I had believed in for years. The man I had built a future around had never fully been in it with me. Claire, please, he said, standing too. I love you. Isn't that enough? I let out a shaky breath. No, Dan. Love isn't enough. His face fell. What are you saying? Tears blurred my vision. I'm saying I can't stay engaged to someone who doesn't actually want a future with me. His eyes widened. Claire. I'm not angry at you, I interrupted, my voice trembling. I'm heartbroken, because I've spent years believing in something that was never real. Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words, and then I did the hardest thing I'd ever done. I took off my engagement ring. His breath hitched as I placed it gently on the table between us. I love you, I whispered. But I love me too, and I deserve someone who doesn't hesitate when it comes to forever. Tears welled in his eyes, but I couldn't stay to watch them fall. I turned, grabbed my bag, and walked out the door. And for the first time in years, I was free to find someone who wouldn't be afraid to set a date. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Have you ever been in a relationship where love just wasn't enough? Share your thoughts below.